Well, to explain all of this a little bit further is Zeidon Alkinani. He's a lecturer of Middle Eastern politics at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Thanks so much for coming in and speaking with us. First of all, can you just, I guess, give us an idea of how important this specific election is? What exactly is at stake? How consequential is it likely to be?
Well, the political environment in Iraq has been increasingly hostile, starting from especially in 2019 when the protest movement pushed the Iraqi government and the Iraqi political establishment to have the first early elections since the foundation of this new democratized political system, also known as the Muhassasa system, based on the sectarian apportionment, which you rightfully mentioned. It's also very important given the regional implications since October 2023, October 7, which was a major indication in the willingness of the Iraqi Prime Minister in trying to take a distance away from the regional developments, despite the pressures of the Iranian regime, which plays a vital role in the coordination framework that is the same framework that nominated the Iraqi Prime Minister today. There's three different layers of the rivalries or the discussions behind closed doors that are more important than the actual elections. As we know, elections in Iraq might determine the number of seats that each electoral coalition might end up having in parliament, but it doesn't determine the ministerial cabinets. It doesn't determine who the prime minister or the speaker of parliament or the president. What determines it is the sectarian apportionment, which you rightfully mentioned, and that includes traditional political parties that tend to monopolize that nomination.
Because of the way that Iraq politics is set up, I mean, the Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr has been calling on his followers to boycott it, and that's one of the reasons why some people are saying that the turnout is going to be so low here. So can you just explain how significant that is and I guess why Iraqis should go to the polls if that is the case?
Well, of course, the Sadrist movement is one of the most, if not the largest, electoral fan base in the country. It has been increasing its seats in each election since they started participating in 2010, which was their first electoral parliamentary participation. They have been trying, or the Sadrist leader, Muqtada al-Sadr, has been trying to achieve a majority government where he would unilaterally monopolize the nomination of the Shia part or share of the power, which would be the Prime Minister, and that was received by a strong opposition from the coordination framework, which included the other Shia political parties, many of them Iran-aligned and others not. And that takes us back to the intra-Shia political elitist rivalry that delayed the government formation between 2001 and 2002. Now that the coordination framework is alone, we have an intra-coordination framework rivalry between the current Prime Minister trying to endorse some endorsements from the 7 political parties through the coalition he has created against his former allies in the coordination framework, meaning the 3 different rivalries within each of those intra-sectarian political camps that or perhaps will be an indication where we could predict that there might be a very long government formation delay following these elections is the intra-coordination framework rivalry. It may be the Sunni and the Kurdish disagreement, which is very unique, where we have the former Speaker of Parliament, Mohammed al-Halbousi, suggesting that the Sunni nomination might be towards the presidency rather than the Speaker of Parliament, which goes against the Kurdish share of power.
Right.
All of these indications teaches us and lets us know about the competition over the patronage rather than competition over policy programs that might benefit the voters, which is why we're noticing very low voter turnout.
OK. Well, obviously, it's not just people in Iraq that are keeping a close eye on this. Obviously, the US and Iran. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the outside influence that I guess the vested interests that people have in Iraq, especially Iran?
Absolutely. So this election is the most election that keeps its eye on a major political development where Iraqi political discourse, including Iranian and American political eyes viewing this, is that the Iraqi political discourse today has been the most vocal time it has ever been towards the future of the pro-Iran groups within the PMF, also known in Arabic as the Fasa'il. And this is an important distinction in order to be able to distinguish between the armed groups and the militias within the PMF. They have different alliances, different schools of thought, and different relationships with the state. Some that have a stronger relationship with the idea of having the state being empowered, and others that prefer to have more autonomy and independence from the state, despite benefiting from the economic and the institutional resources of the state. This election and this government formation may indicate that 2026 will be the most detrimental political development and period for the fate and the future of these militias and armed groups.
OK, so a lot at stake. Thank you so much. We'll leave it there for the moment, but we really do appreciate you coming in and speaking.
In Middle Eastern politics at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Zeidon, it's good to have you with us. Once we get the results, it's not the end of the story. Some would say it's really actually the beginning of the story, because it's all going to be about coalition building. Nobody's going to get an outright majority. So whoever wins the highest number of seats is going to have to build a coalition. That is the central part of Iraqi politics. Explain to us how that works.
Absolutely. So from a parliamentarian perspective and a constitutional perspective, you need at least 90 seats to have the majority of the quorum, which led to why the Sadrist movement decided to withdraw in the last government formation that resulted into 1 year of negotiations where we witnessed no cabinet or ministerial cabinet ending up after the first early elections since the 2019 protest movement. With the Sadrist withdrawal right now, it seems like both factions that are dividing the coordination framework, the ruling Shia party today, between the current Prime Minister and Qais al-Khazali and Nouri al-Maliki, who's also a former Prime Minister of 2 consecutive terms, it seems like they would not make it to 90 or 80, according to many of the statistical and numbering predictions. But of course, in post-2003 Iraqi politics, we always know that the elections does not determine who will be ruling the country. It is what you, as rightfully mentioned, the muhassasa political system, which is a sectarian apportionment system, deciding through an identity institutionalized political system between these 3 different components, assuming they're homogenous and assuming they're the only components representing a very heterogeneous and diverse Iraqi society. And then you also have the intra-sectarian political rivalries, which your correspondent rightfully mentioned, which is becoming the most detrimental political rivalry that is ending up creating these governmental formation delays. We are expecting long negotiations. We're even expecting a lot of external interventions, depending on the alliances that will result in the coming months.
If you look at the last couple of election results, mainly you have Sunnis voting for Sunni candidates, Shias voting for Shia candidates, Kurds voting for Kurds. There's very little, the Sunni prime minister didn't get any of his seats, didn't get any of his votes from, say, the Shia majority. And those who were voted into office representing the Shia didn't get any of their votes from Sunni voters. Right. What does that tell you about Iraq as a country?
Of course. So there's 2 things here. The capital city, Baghdad, is the exception where you would have trans-sectarian votes from different votes, where you'd have Sunni voters voting for a Shia candidate and vice versa. But in the other provinces, which is the majority of the country, that takes us back to the main point of why there is an issue with the consultational framework that was established by the occupational forces in the early days of the invasion, creating an institution, an identity.
When you say the invasion, you mean the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Yeah.
Right, the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the constitution, the political system that was represented as this consultational framework in 2005, where you limit the democratic practice of an ordinary Iraqi citizen based on his or her sub-identity, rather than their interest in the programs and the electoral promises, in ideas and promises and interests and priorities that may translate into better public services, public goods, improving the healthcare system, improving the educational sector, ensuring higher employment rates for the graduates on an annual basis. Most of the political discourse, as you will be noticing in this election and in other election, is filled with sectarian rhetoric as a tool to politically exploit masses and mobilize masses to fall under their sectarian rhetoric discourse umbrella in order to get these votes. Very little promises, very little programs, and very little strategies, long-term strategies in improving the living standards and the welfare of the country.
Zeidon Alkinani, thank you very much for joining us in the studio this hour. Thanks.